I want to welcome, this panel is about technology trends and architecture. And we have put together an extremely talented panelists here, group of panelists. So let me start by introducing first to my extreme left is Ken Owens, who's the Chief Technology Officer and CI, Chief for the Cloud Infrastructure Services at Cisco. And prior to Cisco, he was with Savis, which is now CenturyLink. And then on the right of Ken, I have Sindhu Payankulath. Sindhu is the Vice President of Global Network Engineering and Operations at Equinix. She runs a very complex set of data centers across America, EMEA, and Asia-Pac, and came back to this conference just in time. Prior to being at Equinix, Sindhu has been with Cisco and with Brocade. And then, of course, to my extreme left, my left right here is Atul Garg from Hewlett Packard. Atul is the President and General Manager of Hewlett Packard Company and is responsible for software, cloud, and automation business. Atul has been with HP, and prior to that, he was with BMC, which he got there by way of an acquisition of a company that he was in the co-founding team of that company called Proactive Network. So welcome, all three of you, and let's jump right into the discussion. So these are very exciting times in the networking space, as we have seen in the prior conversations as well. So I'd like to start out first by giving each of my panelists, starting with Atul, a couple of minutes to talk specifically about your roles at your companies, but also lead in with some thoughts on what are the major trends that are impacting the industry now, and why is this becoming so exciting, and we'll take it from there. Atul, please.
Sure. Thanks, Prem. So hi, I'm Atul Garg. I run the cloud and automation business at HP. Hi, I'm Atul Garg. I run the cloud and automation business at HP Software. The way we really look at it is cloud is a journey for most customers, especially the large IT organizations, the Global 2000 companies. And what these customers are really looking for is to automate their routine tasks, like provisioning or patching or compliance, so they can drive efficiency in their data center. And then they really want to move to orchestration of workflows and processes or runbooks so that they can really get the agility that we all talked about earlier. And then the ultimate end goal for most of these customers is to transform their service delivery so that they can build, operate, and optimize their hybrid cloud environment. In terms of the challenges that we see, it's today in terms of most of these IT organizations, it's not really that difficult to create infrastructure as a service. They can build a private cloud, or they can use public cloud to get a VM on demand. The real challenge for most of these companies that we see is how do you create a platform that allows them to automate the delivery of a web server or databases or the middleware like a JBoss. And the real challenge there is customization. Most of these large companies have different lines of businesses, different developers with unique demands, and they have customized their applications in very different ways. So it becomes very, very hard for them to really use something standard out of the box. And a simple kind of example I would say is that cloud is really like an IT vending machine. And it's easy for a cloud vending machine to give snacks or a drink. But let's say if you wanted a tea and coffee and a toast and an egg, yes, you can kind of do that in Japan because it's really very advanced. They have vending machines, one vending machine for every 23 people. It's the most number of vending machines out there. But in that vending machine, if you wanted to get, instead of that boiled egg, because that's all you can get, you wanted, like me, I like to order an egg white omelet with onion, tomato, and chilies. I think that's going to be tough. And that's the challenge facing most of these organizations, and especially in the public cloud, that's not going to happen. So really what the customers are looking for is they want to have an automated cafeteria, not a snack vending machine.
Thank you. You're making us hungry now.
Hey, everyone. I'm Sindhu. I'm from Equinix. Equinix is actually a large data center provider company. We have about 100+ data centers around 33 metros in the world. And I personally am responsible for running the network operations for this large global network. What that means is I'm responsible for keeping these networks run 24/7. Our customers come in and get space, power, and interconnections from us. I have to make sure that the interconnections are always available for them, irrespective of where they're going. The challenge with that I bring to the table here is I'm an operations group, and I have to go through a lot of disparate networks as I am weeding through this interconnections problem for customers. There is no single pane of glass that exists anywhere from an operations team that I can leverage and use in a multi-vendor network that I run and manage. I heard the previous speaker in the previous panel speak about exactly the same problem that I was bringing to the table here. So that's amazing. I think the whole operations community sees a large need for this, and that's really a problem to solve.
Ken, you want to add your color to it?
Yeah, thanks, Prem. So I'm Ken Owens, and the fun thing about being up here and hearing the network issues is I'm from Cisco, and so I think we can help with all these network issues. We're great at network. Don't need to talk too much about network when you're from Cisco, because that's just what we do, right? What I think is the biggest problem, though, is not the network, even though network is definitely a problem. It's not even necessarily the infrastructure, even though you do depend and rely on that infrastructure. It's really helping the business be agile and make quick and fast decisions to change and pivot as the market and the conditions around them change. And so what I'm doing and what I'm bringing to this discussion is from this whole Cisco intercloud marketplace model, we really understand that there is a disconnect between all these different disparate clouds out there. And like we did back in the 90s with the internet and with IP and TCP, we're trying to create an intercloud to help interconnect all of these clouds seamlessly together, provide the right networking for sure, provide the right infrastructure and availability and security controls that you heard earlier are very important still to all enterprises. But I think what's different is we're looking at it from an application delivery engine and the Internet of Everything delivery engine. And so as you're looking at these different development tool chains that you heard Twitter and you heard Coca-Cola talking about, every enterprise has to struggle with how do they create their application, how do they maintain their application, how do they build it, how do they deploy it, and how do they run it. And that's the problem we want to tackle, and that's the problem that is around microservices. It's around dev native, DevOps. It's around transforming your development group to be more agile and more fast to make these decisions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the panelists. My next question is to Atul to lead off. Of course, it seems like it's about vending machines and food, and network is not the network. But Atul, I'd like to ask you that let's talk about private and public cloud. And a little provocative question would be that if it is so complex, wouldn't it be easier if everything went to 2 or 3 public cloud service providers and the work will be easier for the enterprises? But I know that's not the answer, but in any case, could you add some color to the fact that why do customers eventually want a private and public cloud, and what is HP doing about that, and why there is what lies ahead for us?
Sure. So I think the real challenge for most of the customers is, even today after 40 plus years, they have the IBM mainframe. It's not going to go to the cloud. They have a lot of applications and a lot of data that is actually residing in the cloud. And they have a lot of these applications that interdepend upon each other. So just figuring out a way to extract an application and move it to the cloud is really a challenge. But what most of these large companies are doing is, if they have a new application, and this whole smartphone has really given the opportunity for a lot of companies to create new applications. So they can actually create these new mobile applications on the cloud and figure out a way to create a small funnel or a tunnel back to their internal IT infrastructure to get that data. But the rest of that organization is looking for still agility in their environment and efficiency for their existing systems. So they have tremendous opportunity to take advantage of the technologies that exist, where you can kind of create a self-service portal to get a server. And the biggest reason why customers are looking to move to a private cloud internally is really just to provision a server today takes weeks, even if you have a VM and virtualized environment. And it takes, on an average, 20 hours of time from manual labor in terms of the manual handoffs. And they want to eliminate that. And that's why it's going to, private cloud is really going to be taking off.
Fantastic. Ken, I'm going to pose that same question to you to add more information to it, is that what are the reasons that customers are adopting private cloud? And what is the difference really between private and public cloud, if you can expand on that?
Yeah, definitely. I think just to add to what Atul was saying, the private cloud is sort of, I look at it as enterprises want that agility and that flexibility and that self-service, but they don't want to put their business at risk, and they don't want to put their data or their customers at risk. And so the biggest difference to me is the private cloud is behind the corporation firewall. It ties into all the internal IT systems and processes and the security governance that's in place within the enterprise. The public cloud is outside of that security domain, outside of the governance and controls that IT has defined for that enterprise. There are things you obviously would talk to your public cloud provider about to ensure that you have the same level of security policy, the same level of governance and compliance that you need. I'm not saying any enterprise would go to a public cloud that's insecure and not available for their needs, right? But I think that's the big difference, is your security team addresses any security incident that happens inside your private cloud. You're trusting the public cloud provider's security team to address any issue that happens in their cloud environment. You don't get access to their cloud to troubleshoot and figure out what's wrong. And I think that's, to me, the biggest difference between the two.
As a follow-up on that, Ken, back to you, is that what do you forecast the next 5 years in terms of the breakdown between public and private cloud adoption? I know public is so far ahead now, but how do you see that evolving? And perhaps, I should have asked Atul that question as well.
Yeah, definitely. Right now, the private cloud is a lot more popular than I think people realize. I feel like most of the infrastructure budgets are being spent on internal private cloud. I think public cloud is still way behind the private cloud uptake. But what we're seeing today and over the next 5 years is I think you're seeing more enterprises are moving their workloads and identifying what workloads and what applications that they're developing should be targeting for cloud first, is the word you hear a lot, cloud first. And the reason they're doing that is they want to try to get into this marketplace and this more agile development life cycle, and they're finding that their internal IT deployments cannot be that fast. There's still weeks and 20 hours, as you heard earlier, right? There's still a lot of time internally needed, and you still have to schedule time to test your app. You have to schedule a window to deploy your app. And so they're moving towards the public cloud a lot faster, but I don't see a time when everything will be in the public cloud. You're going to have this private cloud and this public cloud, and you're going to have what we call hybrid cloud, I think will be the predominant use case from now and into the future, where you probably will have more and more workloads moving to the cloud. That, to give you a number, I've heard that about 90% of enterprise IT apps are inside the data center and 10% are outside the data center. And so I think you're not going to ever see it swing to the public cloud, in my view, but I think in the next 5 years, you're going to see that become more like 60-40 or close to 50-50. And depending on how quickly the market and the security controls can be addressed in the public clouds, you may see it swing over to the public clouds at some point in the next 5 to 10 years.
Thank you. And Sindhu, from your point of view at Equinix, you sort of straddle both areas. So what do you think about the customer adoption of private versus public?
I agree with what Ken mentioned earlier. The trend that we are seeing is a lot of our customers today have private clouds, and they do have private cloud deployments within Equinix, right? And outside of it as well. And when they come talk to us, they're actually thinking about, a portion of this is going to stay private, and I'm going to continue to keep it private for reasons he mentioned, right? I can have the agility of the DevOps environment and stuff like that in my private environment. And then there are a certain fraction of it that is, maybe a large fraction of it that they see eventually move into public clouds, specifically as they go towards productivity applications and stuff like that in the public clouds that they love, right? Microsoft Office packages, the Google Cloud, Cisco's WebEx. All these are really magnets that are beginning to attract enterprises to go to public cloud more. And as we see more and more of these SaaS technologies be made available in large brand name public clouds, I think there's a lot more barrier to entry that's going to go away, and people are going to migrate. It may not be there today. There's definitely a trend where the migration is happening to public cloud for certain applications and so on, but it's going to continue to grow in the next 3 to 5 years.
Well, this is a room full of entrepreneurs, and this is the time to give back some opportunities to them. And you mentioned so many challenges that the hybrid cloud or the private cloud has to catch up to public cloud. So I'll start with Ken and ask that, Ken, can you suggest to the audience here, where are the gaps that private cloud needs to catch up or the industry needs to catch up to enable what you all three of you have forecasted? Yeah.
Yeah, I would focus on two main gaps. The first one is around cloud native application development. I think that's where, even if you're not going to push your app out to the public cloud, that's the biggest gap internally today. Is it's too many tools, there are too many options. There's not enough of an experience for a developer to truly take a new idea and put it out into the marketplace as quick as they can. It takes weeks and months sometimes, and they won't be able to do that in 5 minutes. And so that's the first gap, is to be able to kind of get that application from an idea or a concept into the market as quick as you can, like in minutes. And then the second gap, I think, is around some of the orchestration and some of the provisioning that was mentioned earlier. I hate to use the word legacy, but most IT groups have their own systems, their own IT systems and their own back office systems. And those systems were built to kind of handle static, provisionable, people sit down and provision systems, they provision the CMDB, they connect that CMDB back into the ticketing system and they create tickets, and there's a person that does all of that. And what private cloud needs to do is be completely 100% automated, allow you to just be able to have a set of APIs and standard interfaces, which is, what people like, Cisco with our Openstack work that we're doing, VMware with their open APIs that they provide. Equinix has their own set of APIs that they provide, and so HP has a set of APIs. So it's important that the enterprises start bringing in what I kind of call IT automation experts or IT automation DevOps that can kind of look at these APIs and help automate the back-end office and the back office provisioning, because there really is no reason to have to. One of the issues with the 20 hours is it's, and most of you probably know this, but if you want to create a new server, that server needs a network. So you have to have somebody set up a ticket and a change order to go out and configure that router and configure those switches to create that VLAN, connect that VLAN back into the local switch that then connects to that physical server, and then that physical server needs to have somebody go in and provision the VNet that connects to that network that you just set up. And that whole process is 100% automatable today, and it's been automatable for 10 years. There's no reason for it not to be automated completely, but it's just a mind shift change in the enterprise to really automate first and not think about trying to pivot later. Just automate what you have today is my best recommendation there.
Thank you. And Atul, I'll ask you to add to what is HP looking for, or what gaps are there in the industry?
Sure. As I mentioned earlier, what customers are really looking to do is transform their service delivery. And there are really three key things. They want to build. They want to build their private cloud. And that's kind of, in many ways, lots of big vendors are already attacking that and doing well. The next part is to operate. I think there's a lot of opportunity in there. But the ultimate, if you really go longer term, is to optimize. And in optimize, there are really two key gaps that are still there. And number one, I would say, is the goal of the cloud is to be able to move workloads from a private cloud, burst into the public cloud when you need a new capacity. So having that capability to move workloads in a simple, easy fashion is not there yet. And that's a big gap and an opportunity for entrepreneurs that are in this room to take on that big challenge. And it's not an easy problem to solve. Otherwise, Cisco and HP would be working on it and trying to solve it. The second big gap is really what I would say is governance. And in governance, we talked about security, but it's really at the high level, how do you abstract out what the policies are and then drive the security? And in that security space, there is a lot of work being done on the perimeter security and all these other areas. But if you ask a lot of these banks and financial services, the number one issue is the problems that occur inside their own perimeter. It's the server. you really need to figure out a way to lock down that server. And so that's an opportunity. It's done manually today, but it should be automated, and you can drive down costs in a big way if you do that.
Thank you. On that, follow-up question of that, technologically, has Openstack an issue with the rate of adoption of hybrid cloud, and are there opportunities in Openstack that you would elaborate on as well?
Absolutely. In fact, the migration, the perfect opportunity is to migrate a workload from VMware to OpenStack or Azure to OpenStack and Amazon to OpenStack. And in fact, we acquired a company called Eucalyptus that actually moves the workload from Amazon into a private cloud. And we are looking at how we can actually drive that to move to OpenStack. So that, I think, is a huge opportunity. And as Mark talked about earlier, I think the open source is really a winning play. And this whole thing in terms of what the customers want is cloud native. And this OpenStack and Cloud Foundry is really going to get you there. But it's a journey. Most customers need a lot of tools today for their existing environment. But end goal is really kind of something like the dev platform that Mark talked about earlier, with OpenStack as the foundation.
Thank you. And Sindhu, from your perspective at Equinix, you are having to deal with a lot of migration between different cloud implementations for your customers. So how does that take place, and what services do you offer? And maybe you can add on that.
Sure. I'll probably expand a little bit on what Atul mentioned earlier. Equinix does OpenStack today. Right? We have a programmable network, and we have our APIs opened out for our customers to be able to go there and do dynamic configurations and stuff like that on our network, on our cloud offering. Our customers seem to love it. So there's definitely adoption to OpenStack that we see that's happening all over the place. That brings the agility, that brings the DevOps environment in their mind. Now, going back to what is a challenge this necessarily brings us is, you imagine an enterprise with their private data centers somewhere in location X, going through some network over to a public cloud and reaching an application that is sitting behind the public cloud, a SaaS application or something like that. The biggest challenge here is there is no single orchestration that they can deploy to be able to figure out delivery and service assurance. I think that is a huge opportunity. Innovation will always happen. SDN, NFV, all these things will really, really take off, and because it brings a lot of benefits to the end customers. But along with it, the next set of problems that needs to be solved is, what do you have to be able to ensure that service delivery? How do you manage that SLAs? The SLAs are going to get much more rigorous than what it is today. How do you manage for those SLAs, and how do you provide service assurance? Those are really the next set of challenges that we are thinking about.
Sindhu, on that line, you mentioned the three-letter acronym SDN, and I know your bio says you had expertise and experience in that area. So I'd like to lead off with a question to you that, all these technologies, SDN, and then there's NFV, and now we're talking about Docker and containers. But from your background, how much is the adoption of SDN, and what do you see as the next few milestones there?
See, SDN has got both the open data, the open flow, as well as the OpenStack aspects to it, right? If I just think of SDN as a whole, there's a lot of motivation to go towards SDN-enabled networks. Why that is the case? Today, network architectures are very static, right? You define the networks, you implement the networks, you put it in place, and you don't touch it, you don't change anything. But with SDN and network function virtualization, you actually have the ability to transform the networks dynamically, at will, right? Per call, per session basis, an enterprise customer can come in and say, this is exactly what I want you to do in your network, and they have the ability to go realize it. That benefit is it's very addictive. You need that, right? And that is why I think, there's a lot of awareness building up. There's definitely a lot of momentum we are seeing, with our Equinix customers as well as within Equinix. There's a lot of push to implement all these technologies.
Okay, thank you. I'm keeping an eye on the clock, and we are running out of time. So what I'd like to do is quickly ask each of you to share a quick one sentence or one thought that you have to give back to the audience from this discussion that we've had. So Atul, starting with you.
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, it's really, the key things are to address the original issue that I talked about, which is how do you build this automated full-service cafeteria, is the number one thing is really the abstraction. So you have to be able to take that service and abstract it so you can actually allow the customization that customers are looking for. And then the second key part in that whole thing is you need a really very powerful fulfillment engine that allows you to stitch together all these pieces based on that service. And this needs to be dynamic. It cannot be that you have if a service is defined that in dev, you have to do some change when you move to production. It needs to be abstracted out so it's late binding to the fulfillment engine. That's a key to win.
Thank you. And Sindhu, from you?
Sure. I think innovations are bound to happen, and network operators have to adopt these innovations to be agile. But as we do this, we really, really need to solve the problem of, in a service-chained environment, what is service assurance and what is service delivery, and how do you necessarily enable the operators with tools for those? I think that's top of mind.
Great point. And Ken?
I think, for me, software is disrupting every company. Every company is becoming a software company. And so it's important, when we think about software-defined networking, software-defined data center, everything is becoming software-defined. It's important to realize that it's the application that matters, and being able to ensure that you're delivering that application, you have the right service assurance capabilities, the right back office interfaces, and the right operating systems to be installed and managed to help you run and maintain that application going forward. Everything's becoming software disrupted, and so just keep that in mind and think about ways you can innovate that will help enable that entire chain from incubation through to production, deployment. Anything that can help automate that software delivery system is the key.
Thank you. And so on that note, thanks for enlightening us with all your great thoughts. And it sounds like it's a journey, and the IT is a vending machine of the future, as Atul said, and that's the goal for the entrepreneurs, to make it as easy to consume as possible. But please join me in thanking Atul, Sindhu, and Ken for this great presentation.
Thank you.